Imagine standing on the edge of a frozen world. The wind cuts through everything. The sky is a permanent ceiling of gray, pressing down on a landscape so vast it could swallow you without a trace. This is not a place built for comfort. This is the Pleistocene, the Ice Age. And for the hominids who called it home, every single day was a war against extinction. They were not like us. Shorter, stockier, built like living battering rams. Their bodies were sculpted by thousands of generations of relentless natural selection. Broad shoulders to grapple, thick necks to absorb impact, powerful legs to sprint across terrain that could crack bones with a single misstep. Their brow ridges jutted forward like armor plating over deep-set eyes that never stopped scanning. They did not have language as we know it. They had something older, something rawer, guttural calls, gestures, expressions carved into faces that had seen more hardship by age 10 than most modern humans will ever know. And yet they survived. Not just survived, they thrived, for hundreds of thousands of years, in conditions that would have destroyed a modern human in days. The tribe was everything. There was no concept of the individual in the way we understand it. You did not exist apart from your group. Your identity, your purpose, your very survival was welded to the people who huddled beside you around that fire at night. The fire, that miraculous, fragile thing, was the center of everything. It was warmth when the world was frozen. It was light when the darkness stretched from horizon to horizon. It was the place where food was shared, where injuries were tended, where the youngest members of the tribe slept wrapped in furs while sentries stood watch against the things that moved in the blackness beyond the glow. Hunting was not sport. It was not recreation. It was a desperate, calculated, often terrifying necessity. A group of 4 hunters would leave camp before dawn, carrying spears tipped with painstakingly chipped stone points lashed to fire-hardened shafts. They carried throwing stones in leather pouches at their hips, smooth, palm-sized rocks selected for weight and balance. They moved in single file across the frozen ground, their breath hanging in the air like small ghosts, their eyes reading the landscape for any sign of prey. When they found it, the chase was explosive. These were not patient stalkers waiting for the perfect moment. They were ambush predators who relied on bursts of terrifying speed and coordinated aggression. The lead hunter would hurl the first throwing stone to startle and redirect the prey, and then they would surge forward as a unit, driving their quarry toward a position where spears could reach. The margin for error was razor-thin. A missed strike meant wasted energy. A stumble on the ice could mean a shattered ankle and a slow death from exposure. Success meant the tribe ate. Failure meant hunger, weakness, and vulnerability. But the animals were not the greatest threat. Other tribes moved across this frozen world. And when resources were scarce, when the herds shifted their migration patterns, when a territory's hunting grounds dried up, when the long winter squeezed tighter and tighter, these other groups would appear on the horizon. Sometimes they were merely passing through. Sometimes they were not. The signs always came first. Strange footprints at the edge of camp. A fire visible in the distance that had not been there before. Calls echoing across the tundra that did not belong to anyone in the tribe. The scouts would report back with urgency, and the camp would transform in minutes. Weapons taken up, children moved behind shelter walls, the mood shifting from daily routine to coiled, watchful tension. The confrontation, when it came, followed patterns as old as the species itself. 2 groups would face each other across open ground, each assessing the other. The leaders would step forward, the strongest, most experienced fighters, adorned with the ornaments that marked their status. The display was critical. Territorial vocalizations, deep, booming, chest-driven roars, would echo across the empty landscape. Weapons would be brandished. The ground would be stomped. Every gesture was a message. We are strong, we are many, this territory is ours, you would be wise to leave. Sometimes the display was enough. The rival group would read the signals, calculate the cost, and withdraw. But sometimes it was not. Sometimes both groups had nowhere else to go. Sometimes the desperation was equal on both sides. And then the violence would begin. Hominid combat was brutal, close, and personal. There was no distance in these fights, no arrows, no tactical formation spread across a battlefield. It was spear against club at arm's length. It was grappling on frozen ground, thick calloused hands gripping hide wraps and bone necklaces. It was the crack of a wooden club against an arm, the thrust of a bone knife, the impact of bodies colliding with the force of desperate animals fighting not for glory but for the right to continue existing. The leader fought at the front. This was not optional, it was fundamental. The strongest led because the strongest fought first. If the leader fell, the group's cohesion could shatter. If the leader stood, the group rallied. Combat between leaders was often the decisive moment. A disarmed opponent, a forced submission, could end the engagement before the losses became catastrophic for either side. And losses were catastrophic. Every injury was potentially fatal. A broken arm meant weeks of vulnerability, of being unable to hunt or defend. A deep wound could become infected with no medicine to fight it. Even the victorious tribe would limp back to camp diminished. Fewer hunters, less strength, a longer road to recovery. This is why the display mattered so much, why every roar and stomped foot was an investment in avoiding the actual fight. Combat was the last resort of groups that had exhausted every other option. After the rival group retreated across the tundra, beaten, diminished, heading for other territories, the victorious tribe did not celebrate. There was no time for celebration. The leader would immediately begin fortifying the camp. Boulders would be rolled into defensive positions. Sharpened wooden stakes would be driven into the frozen ground at outward angles. Secondary fires would be lit at the camp perimeter, creating a ring of light that served both as warmth and as a warning to anything approaching in the darkness. Sentries would be posted through the night, standing motionless between the fires, eyes adapted to the darkness, spears ready. This was not paranoia. This was survival intelligence honed over countless generations. The rival tribe might return. Predators might be drawn by the scent of the camp. The world did not pause to let them recover. In the morning, life resumed its brutal rhythm. New spear points were chipped from flint nodules, each one requiring dozens of precise strikes to shape. The young were taught to throw stones, to read the terrain, to recognize danger. Injuries were tended with crushed plant material and hide wrappings. Provisions were shared equally around the fire. The leader's hands, the mother's hands, the child's small hands all reaching toward the same source. This is what survival looked like for our ancient ancestors. Not the romantic image of noble savages living in harmony with nature. Nature was trying to destroy them every minute of every day. Not the simplistic image of mindless brutes driven only by instinct. Their social structures, their tactical thinking, their capacity for tenderness toward their young, their willingness to sacrifice for the group all speak to a sophistication that predates language, predates art, predates everything we think of as civilization. They endured because they fought. Not just against rival tribes, not just against predators and the cold. They fought against the fundamental indifference of a world that did not care whether they lived or died. Every fire they lit was an act of defiance. Every child they raised was a bet on the future. Every morning they stood up and walked out into that frozen, hostile landscape was a declaration that they would not go quietly. The fire never went out. Through the longest nights, through the worst storms, through every battle and every loss, someone always kept the ember alive. And from those embers, everything we are today eventually grew. Every city, every language, every piece of technology, every act of human kindness and creativity traces back to a small group of hominids standing on the frozen edge of the world, refusing to let the fire die. That is their legacy. That is our inheritance. And it began with the brutal, beautiful, unrelenting fight to protect the tribe.